we are about a week away from the release of Legendary's Godzilla vs. Kong. With that, I thought it would be a great idea to review a couple of films that you can all look forward to. Those include the first 3 Godzilla films, of which I will be reviewing the first right now, and a separate video definitively deciding which King Kong movie is the best King Kong film. Before diving into this film, I think it's important to state how important Godzilla has been in my life. I have watched Godzilla films over and over and over again ever since I was a little kid. I've seen all 30 plus movies, played a bunch of the games. Even at the age of 4 or 5, I can remember watching some of the old Godzilla movies on the Sci-Fi Channel. I even remember when my mom and dad bought me a VHS copy of Son of Godzilla, and I remember renting Godzilla DVDs over and over again from Blockbuster. RIP. Saying that I have a love and a passion for this franchise is a bit of an understatement. So, without further ado, let's get into Ishiro Honda's 1954 masterpiece that started it all, Gojira. We start with very ominous, drumming loud footsteps, followed by that iconic roar, and ending with that simply immaculate, timeless, and classic score of the film. You know what I'm talking about. We actually start off the film on a boat with some sailors just chilling when there is a loud noise and the water starts to erupt with light and the ship sinks into flames in the ocean. However, the crew does manage to send out an SOS. We are introduced to main characters Ogata and Emiko, as Ogata gets called in to respond to the distress signal, meaning he won't be able to make their date. There is a lot of distress over the missing freighter called the Ikumaru. Another ship called the Bingo Maru approaches the area and it is also destroyed. A few survivors are found by a fishing boat. I do really like the scenes dedicated to finding out what happened to the missing ships. The families are very worried, the acting is good, and it feels as if this is really what would happen when a ship goes missing. I really like that we get to see the families demanding to know what happened to their loved ones and pressing for answers and what the plans are to find them. Sadly, the fishing boat is also lost and goes missing at sea. We see headlines about the mysteriously sunk ships, sea mines, or even undersea volcanoes erupting, perhaps being responsible. A raft drifts to Odo Island, carrying the only survivor of these disasters, Masaji. He says, "It got us, and our boat too," as he passes out. Later, on the beach, some fishermen note there is no fish at all, not even small fry. An old man comments that it must be Godzilla and gets laughed at. He snaps back to have respect for the old traditions. There was once a tradition where if there were no fish, a girl would be sent out on a raft and offered up as a sacrifice to Godzilla. That's all in the past though, now, and this dance is all that remains from that ceremony. There is a huge storm that night, and we see Masaji's house get destroyed, killing himself and his mother in the process, leaving only his younger brother, Shinkichi. After a hearing of some kind, it is decided that a research team led by paleontologist Kyohei Yamane will be sent to investigate what happened on Odo Island, as the scene of the disaster suggests that there was something more than a typhoon on the island that caused such destruction. I know what you're thinking. Who's that inconspicuous man with an eye patch wearing sunglasses? Well, this is Dr. Mother Flippin' Serizawa, a man who is perhaps one of my favorite characters in movie history. But we'll get back to him, don't you worry. Emiko, we discover, is the daughter of Dr. Yamane, and she is going to go on this research voyage, as well as Ogata. Once on the island, it is discovered that there is radioactive fallout and a footprint from a gigantic creature. And not just that, but the radiation is emanating from one of these footprints. An ancient fossil of a trilobite, long thought to have been an extinct creature, is also found in one of the footprints. There is a loud alarm bell rung, warning of Godzilla being spotted on the other side of the island, as you hear those thundering footsteps from the beginning of the film. While walking up the side of a large cliff, Godzilla appears, with his head towering over the hill as he lets out a mighty roar. As everyone runs away, the crowd rushes to get another look from the top of the hill. But unfortunately, Godzilla has returned to the sea. And this is a shot from the movie that has stuck with me ever since I was a kid. The beach and the footprints, man, what a great shot. Even the attention to detail, you can tell that he was dragging his tail across the shore as well. Man, it's so good. Professor Yamane suggests that Godzilla is a rare intermediate organism that was evolving between the geological period and the Cretaceous period from a marine animal to a terrestrial animal. He proposes calling the creature Gojira, just as the inhabitants of Odo Island do in their legend. He estimates Godzilla to be 165 feet tall. Professor Yamane suggests that Godzilla was hibernating in a deep sea cave and that repeated underwater H-bomb tests have eviscerated his natural habitat, leading him to the surface world, our world. The trilobite has sand estimated to be from around the Jurassic era strata. The same sand had traces of strontium-90 found in hydrogen bombs, leading him to suggest that Godzilla is also emanating radiation that he has absorbed. It is decided that a frigate squadron will drop depth charges in the sea in an attempt to kill Godzilla around the area where he has been spotted. Professor Yamane doesn't want to see Godzilla killed because, he's a paleontologist slash zoologist. They refer to him as both. And, this is a one-of-a-kind creature. Later, we run into some young people partying it up on a ship.
We got a #1 victory royale. Yeah, Fortnite, we bout to get down. 10 kills on the board right now. Just wiped out Tomato Town.
It was a toss-up between either that or Shake Ya Ass. And then I thought to myself,
¿Por qué no los dos?
So here's the alternative version.
Attention, all your plays and pimps right now in the place to be. Shake your ass, but watch yourself. Shake your ass, and show them what you're working with.
Unfortunately, the drop charges did not work, and Godzilla is spotted by the people on this ship. The possibility of having to close international shipping lanes leads officials to ask Professor Yamane if there is a way to kill Godzilla. And Professor Yamane brings up a valid point.
山根博士、率直に申し上げます。いかにしたらゴジラの生命を絶つことができるか、その対策を伺いたいんです。
それは無理です。水爆の洗礼を受けながらも、なおかつ生命を保っているゴジラを何をもって抹殺しようというのですか。
It is not until we get to 35-ish minutes that we learn anything about our main characters, besides Professor Yamane. Reporter Hagiwara is tasked with interviewing Dr. Serizawa. We learn that Serizawa is Professor Yamane's future son-in-law. But Emiko is not in love with Dr. Serizawa and considers him to be like a brother to her. She is really in love with Ogata. She suggests that they bring this up to her father. So I don't know if this was like an arranged marriage, or you have to ask for the father's permission to marry the female and she doesn't get a say, and Serizawa asked Professor Yamane for her hand in marriage or something. I don't know what's up, but that's the situation. Bit of a fustercluck if you ask me. We also learned that Dr. Serizawa lost his eye fighting in the war, probably referring to World War II. Hagiwara asks Emiko for help to get to Serizawa, as Serizawa refused an interview with him. Dr. Serizawa is revealed to be a scientist slash researcher, if you couldn't tell by the eye patch and lab coat. Dr. Serizawa is very secretive about what he is currently working on and refuses to give the reporter any hints. But when Emiko asks him in private what he's working on, he cracks and reveals to her his project so long as she keeps it a secret. The project is so dangerous that it scares Emiko. Godzilla appears off the coast of Tokyo for the first time in Tokyo Bay. He's getting closer to the mainland, not just the far outer islands. He comes ashore, causes some destruction, and soon leaves back to the sea. The military evacuates many who live close to shore and prepare for another imminent attack from Godzilla with electrified barbed wire surrounding Tokyo Bay. Oh yeah, and I guess Ogata plans on revealing to Professor Yamane that he is in love with Emiko, but when the professor comes home, he's in no mood, and the two argue over whether Godzilla should be studied or killed, and he gets kicked out. Godzilla once again comes ashore, and this begins the big final city attack. Some of the effects might seem a little dated, especially when compared to some of the wild stuff that we can do with CGI nowadays, but I still really like and have an appreciation for the effects. The acting and music help carry the less than spectacular effects. The dark and hopeless atmosphere is maintained even with some of the effects being a little lackluster. There's a lot of memorable bits that are visually great, like Godzilla being surrounded by a sea of flames consuming the city, Godzilla pushing through the electrified fence, using his radioactive heat breath, and more. He does look a little derpy at times though, I'll give you that. Also, I just want to mention here, Godzilla barking at a bell tower that is ringing is kind of funny though. Some jets show up and proceed to take the fight to Godzilla for the first time. But amazingly, they all somehow manage to miss. I mean it, not a single missile hits Godzilla. At first, I thought it was a safety hazard, tying explosive devices to the person in the suit. I thought maybe they just didn't want to damage the suit or cause a fire. But then I remember you see many explosives hit Godzilla from tanks earlier, so I'm not sure what's up here. They definitely ramp it up though later in later movies where you can visually see the suit on fire with the actor still in it. But anyway, the pilots miss. It's pretty crazy. Maybe these pilots just need to put some extra hours into Star Wars Rogue Squadron. We then see the aftermath of the attack, the destruction, the victims, and we find out that some of the victims are suffering from exposure to radiation. Emiko reveals to Ogata the nature of Dr. Serizawa's experiment, the oxygen destroyer. It splits oxygen atoms into fluid. The organisms suffocate and the remains are liquefied. He originally started out researching everything he could about oxygen, and that led him to this, the oxygen destroyer. In this experiment, he discovered a new element, and he does not want to reveal the oxygen destroyer to the world until he can find a good use for it, not as a weapon, but in a way that it can benefit humanity. Ogata and Emiko confront Serizawa and ask him to use the oxygen destroyer against Godzilla. Dr. Serizawa refuses, and his arguments make total sense.
今この不幸を救えるのは芹田さん、あなただけです。たとえここでゴジラを倒すために使用しても、あなたが絶対に公表しない限り破壊兵器として使用される恐れはないじゃありませんか。尾形、人間というものは弱いもんだよ。一切の書類を焼いたとしても俺の頭の中には残っている。俺が死なない限りどんなことで再び使用する立場に追い込まれないと誰が断言できる。
Dr. Serizawa sees footage of the destruction while a girls' choir sings over the footage of the aftermath of Godzilla's rampage.
命込めて祈る乙女たちの歌声をお聞きください。
This, along with Emiko and Ogata asking him to use it, finally convinces him to use the oxygen destroyer against Godzilla. He agrees, but burns his research. Dr. Serizawa, Ogata, Emiko Professor Yamane, the Navy, and many reporters go to the sea where Godzilla is resting and put the plan into effect. Dr. Serizawa asks Ogata to give him a diving suit and let him go use it. However, Serizawa has no diving experience, so Ogata agrees only if they go together. The two are lowered into the water and come across Godzilla, who is resting on the seabed. Godzilla is soon alerted to their presence. Serizawa signals for Ogata to be pulled to the surface, but instead of following, he stays underwater with Godzilla. Ogata reaches Serizawa with the radio, where Serizawa wishes Ogata and Emiko happiness together and says goodbye. Ogata orders him to be pulled up, but Serizawa cuts his rope and breathing tube. Serizawa has unleashed his oxygen destroyer, killing Godzilla and himself. The film then ends thereafter. However, I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't share with you Godzilla's death scream and Professor Yamane's closing lines.
ゴジラが最後の一匹だとは思えない。もし水爆実験が続けて行われるとしたら、ゴジラの同類がまた世界のどこかへ現れてくるかもしれない。
Haunting words by Professor Yamane. Okay, so now we get to the characters and actors, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's important to note we barely learn anything about our main characters in the first 30 minutes of the film. Also, this part of the video should really be retitled the Serizawa and Yamane part of the video, because holy shit, they are easily the standout characters and actors of the film. Everyone here does a good job for the most part, but the most compelling characters and best actors in the film are definitely Dr. Serizawa and Professor Yamane. Emiko and Ogata are both good in the role, but their love story feels pretty lackluster and they don't have the best on-screen chemistry. Professor Yamane is played by Takashi Shimura. He goes through the film studying and speculating about Godzilla's origins. He feels bad for Godzilla and feels legitimate sympathy for the creature. He brings in a really good perspective. Godzilla is immune to radiation. He wants to study Godzilla and his biology, perhaps in hopes of learning of a way that humans can adapt and become immune to radiation, especially after what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If humans could become immune to radiation, then perhaps peace could be brought to the world and nuclear weaponry would become useless. While it may seem dumb at first that Yamane wants to study Godzilla rather than kill him, as you hear him discuss it more and more, the more you actually think about it, and it actually kind of makes sense, and you might find yourself agreeing with Professor Yamane. Then we get to Dr. Serizawa, one of my favorite movie characters ever. He is portrayed by Akihiko Hirata. His story and struggle with his morality and the repercussions of the oxygen destroyer are really compelling.
尾形、許してくれ。もしこれが使用できるなら、誰より先にこの俺が持って出たはずだ。だが今のままでは恐るべき破壊兵器に過ぎないんだ。分かってくれよ、なおがさ。もしも一旦このオキシジェンデストロイヤーを使ったら最後、世界の為政者たちが黙って見ているはずがないんだ。必ずこれを武器として使用するに決まっている。原爆対原爆、水爆対水爆、その上さらにこの新しい恐怖の武器を人類の上に加えることは科学者として、いや 一個の人間として許すわけにはいかない。そうだろ?
He was a soldier and lost his eye in the war. I'll give you 2 guesses as to which war you think that was. He is consumed by his work, locked in his lab at almost all hours of the day, only coming out to see off Professor Yamane, Emiko, and Ogata when they leave for Odo Island, showing that he does care about them. Even if he's locked in his lab all day, he knows the dangers that Odo Island possesses, since there's been at least 3 missing ships at this point, and even Ogata comments that perhaps he came out as a final goodbye. He seems to really care for Emiko, as he is hesitant to reveal his work to Professor Yamane, the reporter, and the world, but when Emiko asks, he shows her his work. He might seem really dense, as he doesn't know that Emiko and Ogata are in love, but when he dies, he wishes them happiness together, showing that he knew about them all along. His unwillingness to use the oxygen destroyer as a weapon and demonstrate it to the world is perhaps the best aspect of the film, as Serizawa struggles with his morals and his unwillingness to introduce a new superweapon to this world. He could use it to destroy Godzilla and gain a victory for mankind, but other nations would pursue making their own oxygen destroyers in a bid for world power, going after Dr. Serizawa himself or his research notes. But if he doesn't use it, is he then responsible for Godzilla's continued rampages? And is he responsible for the victims' deaths in his unwillingness to use the only weapon that might kill Godzilla?
Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
In media, there is a big story point in using sacrifices. One person sacrifices their life so that they can save the day, the world, or the people they care about.
I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
And I am Iron Man.
Goodbye to you all. Bulma, Trunks, and yes, even you, Kakarot.
Here, Dr. Serizawa's sacrifice, in my opinion, is one of the best sacrifices in any film, show, or book. He not only kills Godzilla, but upon using the oxygen destroyer, he has introduced the world to this new superweapon. So he burns his documents of research and ends his life along with Godzilla so that no one could ever coerce or force him to use his weapon again. He sacrifices himself in order to keep up with his ideals. Dr. Serizawa is just a great character, and his decision in this moral dilemma he's presented with is fantastic. All throughout the film, there's a dark atmosphere of dread and sadness. Godzilla represents the threat of nuclear weaponry, as he was released upon the world due to nuclear weaponry. When he destroys Tokyo, there is a sea of flames and destruction in his wake. But at the same time, he is a creature. He is something natural that we cannot control. This entire film is filled with tragedy. There is a certain level of tragedy, especially in the character of Masaji. He managed to survive Godzilla once before, but even when rescued and seemingly safe in his home, he still gets killed by Godzilla. Masaji represents survivors of the nuclear weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sure, there were people who survived the initial explosions, but many would later eventually die due to exposure to radiation from the nuclear weapons. Also, it's important to note that there was an American recut of this film called Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Bitch in title, by the way. But if you have a choice between watching the original Japanese cut from 54 or the American recut from 56, definitely go with the original. The American King of the Monsters adds in scenes and forces a new character into scenes from the original as if he was actually there.
The prehistoric monster the Japanese call Godzilla has just walked out of Tokyo Bay. He's as tall as a 30-story building. Now he's making his way toward the city's main line of defense. 300,000 volts of electricity strung around the city as a barrier against Godzilla.
This new character is played by Raymond Burr. I shit you not, they recut the movie to make it look like Raymond Burr was actually there in the original. This is basically what they did. Transition! Ah yes, this dirt. It's made out of dirt. This American version is also about 20 minutes shorter and completely dubbed in English. It also completely destroys the well-structured plot of the original, in my opinion. The original Godzilla starts off as a mystery as you gather information about the lost ships and Godzilla's origins. Then the film ramps up to the destruction of Tokyo. Meanwhile, the King of the Monsters starts with the aftermath of Godzilla's final attack, and the events of the movie are recounted and narrated by Raymond Burr, who is a reporter. Trust me, just stick with the original. It's much better. In the film, there's almost always an interesting and compelling viewpoint or argument or compelling plot point. Now, the music is absolutely fantastic. So many of the songs in the film are absolute timeless bangers that still bring the heat even today. The music just fits so well and conveys power, sadness, and horror. There's not much else I can say about the music except that there is a reason so many of the tracks from this film have been carried over even 60 years after this film was released. You might know Godzilla from some of the funny over-the-top clips from some of the later films, the shitty 98 Roland Emmerich American version, or the recent, surprisingly good MonsterVerse films. But I think it's important to know where Godzilla came from and what the first film is all about. Undoubtedly, whether you love it, hate it, or even if you think it's boring, it is undeniable that this is one of the most influential films ever made in the history of mankind. Just look at all the different countries and filmmakers who have been inspired by the Godzilla series to make their own kaiju giant monster movies. And all of that stemmed from this one film from 1954. Personally, I love the film, and I think it is a timeless classic with a good message, or rather, a warning of the destructive powers of nuclear warfare. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I plan on reviewing Godzilla Raids Again and King Kong vs. Godzilla, the original, both prior to the release of Godzilla vs. Kong on the 31st. Then I also plan to release a huge video where I compare and contrast all of the King Kong movies to decide which is the best King Kong film. So, thanks again for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave a like and sub if you want, or not, whatever. I'm not your mother. And I'll see you guys later.